Hey, what's good, Savages? Welcome to another episode of La Savage Show. I'm your host, Savage Paulson. On today's episode, I am joined by Zach McGibbon. Zach is a radio host, a podcaster, a wrestling commentator. He's also a journalist, just a jack of all trades. I've had him on the podcast in the past. I enjoy our conversation. So let's get to it. Please welcome Zach McGibbon. Hey, what's good?
What's good, man? How are you?
Good, you?
I'm all right.
Awesome. Welcome, man. Welcome. I'm glad you accepted my invitation. I appreciate it, man.
Hey, no problem. I really enjoyed the last time we spoke through this sort of medium, and so when you reached out and said, hey, you want to do this again, it's a no-brainer for me. I want to come back on.
Love it. I love it. I love the setup. It's not always easy to find people that have the proper setup, obviously. Yeah. I'm trying my best to I've slowly built a studio in my home and try to make this as professional as possible. But sometimes it's hard. You know, I have a list of people I'm trying to get on, and I understand that not everybody has the same setup as I do. Yeah. So sometimes it's just like you get people on their cell phones. It's a little choppy. The sound's not that great. But, you know, we do with what we have. So how you been, man?
I've been good. It's been a lot has happened since the last time we spoke through this medium. It's been quite a topsy-turvy ride the last couple of years, but I'm doing all right. I've got a busy week ahead, but you know, I like to keep myself busy and keep myself doing things, but things are good.
Yeah, man, I see you. You're doing, like I said, I announced you. I called you a jack of all trades. You're like a radio host or journalist, right? You're doing radio. You're doing wrestling commentating. By the way, I watched my match from Remix Wrestling.
Yes.
And good job, by the way.
Thank you.
I love hearing your voice, commentating on my match. I enjoy it. I forget the girl's name that you were with.
Ash.
That's right.
That's her worker name. I don't know if I want to use shoot names or whatever, but
let's
Ash.
go with
no,
Ash.
She was fantastic. Yeah, she was fantastic. She was great to work with all night.
I had never met her before, and I'd heard of her. I knew she did other shows. I believe she does, is it C4 or Seaway Valley? I forget.
I believe it's Seaway. I believe she does Seaway.
Yeah, she was great. She was extremely nice. When I met her, super simple. Yeah, she was cool. Really cool. And the same thing. When I listened to my match, I enjoyed both of you. It was really cool. I really enjoyed the setup that they have going on at Remix, you know, at the brewery, and even just you guys, you know, like just standing next to the ring, basically on top of everybody and just making it live. It's how did it feel? Did you do the first show as well?
I did not do the first show. That was the first time that they taped, I believe, a Remix show, because that was the second show. I just got the invite, you know, I want to say a month before the show started, and they were like, hey, we're testing out and thinking about doing some commentary, some recording the show, and we'd love to bring you back as a commentator. And at that point, I had not been doing commentary since, other than some, you know, pre-tape stuff over the pandemic. So when the opportunity kind of came up, I was like, absolutely, love to help you guys. And I know promoters very well, and it was a lot of fun. It was definitely different because initially we were just supposed to be like sitting down and just seeing how the match was going just from a seating position. Yeah. But everybody was so hyped and everybody was so jacked that we could not see a lot of what was going on in the ring. So we had to stand up, and I got to give credit to Ash because she was wearing heels too.
Oh my God.
So the amount of times I had to like make sure that she was not falling off the chair, it was something else, but it was a lot of fun. It was great to be back, and a whole bunch of different variety of matches, and obviously your match was also fantastic to call, and it was it really helps a lot when you know when you have some great wrestlers that go in there and perform really well. It makes our jobs a lot easier when you're calling some really good professional wrestling.
Definitely. And you know, I've wrestled in many different venues with different, you know, environments, and that was a first for me, that type of setup where the crowd is all standing. There's nobody sitting. It's kind of just like they follow you around, even when you're working on the outside of the ring. It was pretty cool. I won't lie. Like, I've always seen those types of shows. You know, there's no guardrails. There's no protection for the fans. The fan kind of plus you're in the brewery. Half the fans are drinking a lot, so it's makes it fun. Just to go back to something you said, you did a lot of commentary. You did live. You do also pre-tape. what's the main, you enjoy more doing pre-tape? I guess pre-tape would be a bit easier than live, but is there something about live recording that you enjoy more, or is it vice versa?
Yeah, I've always been a proponent of live.
Yeah.
Pre-taping from an ease of use standpoint is fantastic, especially when you've got the gear for it. But live, for me as a commentator, to be in the building and feel the energy from the audience and feel how the crowd is into a match, it really goes a long way to how you call a match, because it's one thing for me to, turn on the microphone, put my headset on, and try and determine from the computer audio how it is. It's another thing to determine when you're actually there, you're hearing all the audience members, you hear the crowd. It really helps you get invested. And so, sometimes if I'm really, really busy, I'll prefer the pre-tape. But
yeah,
if I had a choice, it's like, we want to bring you here live, we want you to record it live. It's a no-brainer for me. I love live.
I can imagine. I mean, it's like wrestling in front of nobody. It'd be completely different than wrestling, with no fans versus fans. It's the same thing. There's so much live energy as a performer myself. I know the minute you go through that curtain, I always try to explain to people, like even recently, I forget who I was talking to, and I was explaining, there's different aspects of wrestling. There's the traveling, there's the performance, it's hard physically. There's a lot of hard things about wrestling. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, that feeling you get when you go through the curtain and you get a reaction, it's unmatched in a lot of things I've done. And I mean, listen, I've been in MMA fights live in front of 2,000. Like, I remember my first MMA fight I ever had was an amateur fight in Mansfield, Ohio. It was in 2007, I believe, and I had never fought before. It was my first fight, and there was about, I'd say 1,500 to 2,000 people in this bingo hall, all right, in the middle of, it's called Mansfield, about 30 to 45 minutes outside of Cincinnati, if I'm not mistaken. But
okay,
we drove there from Toronto about 13 hours, and I remember we were about 5 fighters from Toronto, and we were the only Canadians there, and it was just chaos, just utter chaos. I remember it was a cage. I never wrestled. I never fought or even trained in a cage before. I had been training for I'd been training for a year. I wasn't ready. I just wanted to fight. I got an opportunity. It was the craziest shit. It was insane. But there's something about that. I remember the walk. I can remember in details how the walk to the cage went. This was, years and years ago. Mm-hmm. And subsequently, I fought again. I have boxing fights, MMA fights, grappling tournaments, all that stuff. In wrestling, though, it's a continuation. When you're in a fight, like an MMA fight, the minute that cage locks, you don't really pay attention to the crowd. You don't really feed off the crowd. You're so nervous or you're so locked in that you just really focus on what's going on in the moment and trying to do your best. Mm-hmm. In wrestling, it's extremely important, as you know, to be able to listen and feed off the crowd so that your performance goes, together with how they react, and you could kind of gauge what if you're doing is working or if it's not working. So I can only imagine as a commentator, when you're sitting in your office and you're watching a match, it doesn't matter how much the match is great. If you don't get that, you can hear the crowd, but if you don't feel the crowd, it's completely different. And again, I'll give a big shout out to Remix Wrestling. I love what they're doing over there. I know the promoters. I've wrestled them, been in the ring with them. So props to these guys. Riley and Brendan, love these guys. I love what they're doing, and props to them. And I can only imagine how hard it is to run a wrestling show / wrestling promotion. To deal with a bunch of guys like me, man, please. I consider myself pretty easy to deal with, but I know there's a lot of, you're dealing with, 12 to 15 characters every on a night on the show, and stress and everything, man. It's
I'd have to deal with prima donna commentators as well, trying to get their stuff in as well. He's got so much on his plate, that Brandon and Riley.
Do you what's your approach to commentating? Are you yourself? Like, I know you right now, we're talking, me and you're Zach, I'm Stefan, like, we're chilling. I've had you on the podcast before, and every time we have a conversation, it's kind of similar. When I hear you on the mic commentating one of my matches, one of the things I really enjoy is you can tell right from the start there's a knowledge of the craft that you're watching. Extremely knowledgeable in wrestling, but not only in wrestling, but you do your research. You mentioned my mixed martial arts background. You mentioned how you were talking to me before. Like, I do those little details. For me, I pop when I hear a commentator do those things because it adds to the match. I'm always thinking when I'm having a match, like, oh, if we had commentating on this match, I should make sure he tries to say this during this spot or this and that, or even during the match, I have this maybe that could bring a little extra to the commentating. Do you kind of are you yourself when you commentate, or is there like a little bit of like a persona that you bring to the microphone?
I know some different commentators, they like to add like a character to their commentary.
Mm-hmm.
I personally like to have it be myself, maybe a little bit amplified because it is professional wrestling, and at the end of the day, it is entertainment.
Of course.
But I would say it's like 95% me with a little bit of a 5%. Sometimes especially on big moves, I'll go a little bit, I don't want to say over the top, but put in a lot of energy to stuff. I'm a big believer in, mixing history of pro wrestling and what's going on currently and try and, bring the eras together. It kind of brings a legitimacy. So I like to, when I was calling your match and I just kind of seeing your gear and all that, the first things wrestlers I thought of was Inoki and Karl Gotch and these guys that was like, oh, the boots and the black trunks going right back to Catch as Catch Can. And I kind of relate that back to, when you were doing your mixed martial arts and be like being able to bring that all together. I like to bring a combination of like real life stuff and stuff in professional wrestling and kind of make that mix so that when you're listening to it, it's kind of got a sports feel to it. And that's just kind of coming from, calling hockey and calling, I got to do basketball recently, which was a lot of fun, but getting to do different sports commentary, trying to bring that realism element into my commentary while still trying to bring in the entertainment factor and realize it is entertainment and people want to go there to have a good time and understand the performers. And it's just kind of mixing different styles and just kind of creating my own with it.
Let's pivot a little bit. Tell me about your experience that you've been doing with other sports commentating. So you say you did basketball recently. I believe you did hockey as well, right? Yep. You've done hockey in the past. Tell me how that's going and how you're, how it's helping you in your all around like toolbox.
Yeah, it's I recently was able to get back into sports broadcasting through hockey. And so in my area, I'm in the Belleville area of Ontario. So I've been calling a lot of Trenton Golden Hawks games, which is a junior A team. And they play in the OJHL, so it's a lower league than the OHL. But a couple of guys that play there, they get like NCAA Division I scholarships. And so there's some really good players that play this league. And so I recently got back into it, I want to say around September-ish when the season started. And it was just kind of like, I had been out of the sports commentary scene for a little bit, not for obviously with COVID, that played a huge factor, but I wanted to get back into it, want to get my feet wet in sports commentary again. And so an opportunity just kind of came up and to call a couple of the Trenton Golden Hawks home games. And so far, they're currently in a playoff run right now. They just got to the second round. And so
awesome.
That series starts Wednesday. So that should be a lot of fun. And hopefully they continue to move the next couple of rounds. But, just kind of going through sports commentary, specifically hockey. I realize I took some of it actually from wrestling in terms of like note taking. And so I had to get familiar with the players, how each player kind of plays on the ice. So this guy, he's much more of a he's skilled with the puck. He likes to shoot the puck a lot. And in the other case of like a defenseman, he's more of a stay-at-home defenseman. Doesn't like to get too involved on the offensive side of the ice. And so trying to figure out different players and try and match it, and then you have the addition of stats and trying to incorporate stats into the broadcast. And, you know, it kind of goes back to wrestling where you're trying to incorporate different things and mesh it all together into this unique style that makes you stand out. And so I like to try, you know, big thing I always try and bring to all the commentary, whether it be wrestling or hockey or basketball or whatever commentary I'm doing, is I always want to try and bring energy to it. Because if you don't sound invested in what's you're calling, people will catch on right away.
Yeah.
Right away. And so I always want to make sure that, you know, I'm in it, I'm excited and ready to go. And obviously it's much easier for me to get excited for some of the hockey recently with a playoff round. But,
yeah,
you know, just getting excited is like, oh, this guy, he's on a point streak and we got to follow along to see if he can extend this point streak. Oh, this goaltender's on a shutout streak, 2 straight games. He's been able to shut out his opponents. Can that continue? Try and like build and just bring some energy to it. I think that's just the big thing. When it comes to incorporating all the styles of different broadcasting, whether that be through sports or professional wrestling.
It must take a lot of your time, hour-wise, during a week or to do the research, right, on all these players. I mean, if you're following obviously the same team for a whole season, you get used to your team, but not only have to do your research on your team that you're commentating on, but also whoever they're playing against, right? You have to know their player names and all that stuff. I mean, it's always the thing. Every time I listen to either a sports game on the radio, let's say, or like that's the first thing that comes to mind every time. Like, Jesus Christ, they know these players' name, and they pronounce them in like, you're like, oh, that's how you pronounce their name. Like, they make a fact of point of making sure they pronounce it right. They have all the stats. They have all the, this guy 3 years. Like, I'm like, seriously though, it's a lot of work. And props to a guy like you that, like, you have to be passionate not only about sports, of the sports you're calling, obviously hockey, basketball, whatever it is, wrestling. We all know you're passionate about wrestling. And how many hours is it a week to week, a day to day thing that you do, or is it like, how do you do it? How do you manage it?
It's week to week. It's some weeks are definitely busier than others. I could definitely say that. As the regular season was going along, it was more like, when I was starting off, it was a lot of Fridays for me. But then it kind of expanded as, you know, I started to get more comfortable and they needed some more spots to sort of fill. And so it's become more week to week when it comes to like what I need to do for commentary. So it started off with the Trenton Golden Hawks and just being their broadcaster for Hockey TV. Then it sort of expanded to, Your TV, which is the local cable channel here. They're also looking to get a commentator on just in case to fill in. And so then I would do some Your TV stuff. So a lot more, you know, for me, I'm so used to radio where I'm not in front of a camera. I could just use my voice. I could slack off. I could wear shorts. I could wear a t-shirt and nobody notices. But now I got to dress up in a suit, whatever, and got to actually look like I maintain myself. But in terms of, you know, Your TV, then that sort of expanded. It's like, oh, we really like what you're doing with the Golden Hawks. Do you want to do the Wellington Dukes? And Wellington's just a little area in Prince Edward County that's close by as well. It's like, sure, I'll do some Wellington Dukes games. And so it kind of grew from there as the season progressed. And yeah, it's really just week to week. And it's, you know, doing work on the news side of things, and then in between getting my notes organized and then bringing the notes in. And I got to give credit as well to a bunch of the commentators I've gotten to work with as well during the season. They've really done a great job of helping me kind of get incorporated with the league, because I was going into the OJHL cold. I had no idea who the players were, no idea. Like, I knew of the Golden Hawks and I knew the Dukes, but I didn't know of all the teams. I knew it was a similar league to the one I was calling previously. So I got to give props to the commentators as well to kind of fill in as well some of the other details that I may not be able to get just kind of going through a website and determining how these players are. It's getting some, you know, eyes on some of these players and getting some eyewitness accounts of how they play. That's also been super beneficial in terms of growing into the commentator role for hockey. So it's been great. It's been a lot of fun. And yeah, the series is continuing on, and I'm back at it Friday, and you know, it's they've already got a schedule kind of announced for how I'm doing it, and so I know we're doing all the home games, and the hope is that both the Trenton Golden Hawks and the Wellington Dukes made it to the next round, and so the hope is that those two teams face off in the conference finals, and we don't have to worry about missing the road games, and we can cover every single game that's going on in that series. So that's the big hope right now. Wow,
that's awesome, man. I just love watching like someone like you progress through the things they want to do, right? So it's like, I forget what it was. I probably met you quite a long time ago. I've been in the business for 7 years now. I think it's 7 years I've been in the wrestling business. So obviously I met you through there. Followed you on social media. Like I said, we've had you on the podcast before and talk about all the things. And from what I remember, you were an athlete before, right? Rugby.
Yep.
From what I remember, right?
Rugby. A little bit of football as well. A lot of soccer. And I think I also joked as well. It's like once your athletic career ends, the thing that an athlete does is they go into broadcasting. So that's it was just kind of the next step. And I was a big fan of, like, as you mentioned, rugby, and I had an injury playing rugby that just sort of ended a lot of athletic stuff. I'm not saying I was good at. It's not like one of those, I got a bum knee and I could have went pro if it weren't for my bum knee. It was more just like, all right, I've had my fun of athletics. I when I was healing up, I didn't really have that same passion to go back out on the field, but I still loved the sport. I just didn't, feel like going back out there and playing as much anymore. And so it kind of opened up around that time. I was doing podcasts and I was like, well, I could still talk about it. I love talking about the sport, and lo and behold, it's leads to me going to a radio broadcasting program at Algonquin College, and just doing a whole bunch of stuff there. Did my own wrestling radio show there, and also calling hockey as well, being a sports director there. It was really a great experience at that college, just the different things that they teach you and the different tools that you have. Because it's not just, I always tell people think it's like you turn on the mic and you just talk, and it's way more to it than that. And we talked about prep earlier, and in the case of the radio program I was in, there was a lot of understanding the business of radio in terms of like how ads are sold and radio ratings and how that gets tabulated. And so there was that, and learning about demographics and on-air stuff, obviously doing some of the sports stuff as well, scheduling. It was just a whole different array of different tasks that I was able to do from a news side, a sports side, an on-air side, behind-the-scenes role. So it really that radio program really gave me the tools to really kind of continue on and say, I can really do something in this industry with all the tools that I've been given. And so fortunately it's worked out that way, and I'm still in it. They haven't kicked me out quite yet, so things are going good.
I'm sure you're doing great, man. It's funny because as an athlete, sometimes, you want to pursue, and we most, like 99% of athletes probably don't end up making it to any sort of pro league, no matter what the sport is, right? We're all amateurs till we're like in our mid 20s to late 20s, early 30s. And then after a while, you just kind of realize that life goes on, you got to figure out something. But if you're really passionate or really crazy in love with the sport, or like me, I'm a fan of athletics. I'm a fan of many different sports. I grew up, I enjoy watching football. I love basketball. Baseball obviously is my first love. It's my son's only and first sports love. I coach it. I follow it greatly. I've been following the World Baseball Classic these last few weeks. Just love it. It's just, there's something romantic about baseball. I know it sounds cliche, but I just fuck it. I just love it. And everybody's like, oh, it's so boring. I'm like, no, man. I'm a numbers geek. Like, I enjoy statistics and odds and making the right call in the right moment. And there's not a sport like baseball where there's so many things to pay attention. But my point is that, like, for me, for example, like I got into pro wrestling. I was at a late age, and I was 34 years old when I started training. I was coming off I hate to say it like this, but it's basically a failed martial arts attempt at a career. When I started doing martial arts, it was the same thing. I was late. I was 24 years old. I never done any sort of martial arts in my young age, just because it wasn't really a thing back home that I had access to. We had karate classes and taekwondo, but I always wanted to do boxing, and there was none of that where I grew up. You know, small town on the East Coast. It wasn't there. And it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s that I had access to boxing, and then I fell into martial arts by just sheer luck, and just fell in love with the sport and the discipline and what it brought to me. Like quickly realized that martial arts is a thing that I'm not saying that martial arts is the thing I was missing in my life, but the discipline it brought me was definitely the thing that was missing in my life. It was one of the building blocks to the man I am today, the father, the husband. Like, I am super grateful to my first coaches and people that introduced me and showed me the way. And like, it changed everything about who I am right now, and couldn't be more grateful. But at the end of the day, even with my wrestling career now, you know, went 3 years without wrestling. And I've been dipping my toes into this podcasting business, and back and forth, 3-4 different podcasts, tried it a few different times. I enjoyed this as well. So now it's kind of like I'm trying to like build this small thing that, because one day I'm not going to be able to wrestle anymore. It's just a fact. You know, I'm not going to be one of these guys to do it till he's 55. It's not going to happen. You know, I'm 42 already, and it took a lot for me to come back from the pandemic. I thought about it for a very long time, you know, and decided that it was the right move. I wasn't convinced that it was the right move, but now that I've had 3 or 4 matches now since my comeback, I know that I miss it. I've been cutting a lot of promos too, so I'm like, that is also a part that I really want to get better at, and so I'm really investing in. I'm like, if I'm gonna do this maybe for 2, maybe 3 more years, I have to be all in, right? And then in the meantime, I've been talking a long time about starting. I didn't want to go back just into podcasting. What I want to do is I basically want to go into the YouTube business. I'm going to start. This is going to be what we're recording right now. It'll be part of a YouTube channel that'll have my podcast, which will be La Savage Show, which is this, and then I'm planning on having different types of shows as well, kind of a network, but all kind of like shows that all interests. I have different interests. You know, I enjoy sports. I enjoy wrestling. I enjoy talking to cool people. That's probably my most important thing outside of wrestling, is just meeting. Throughout my whole life, through martial arts, through everything I've done, I've met so many great people that I'm still in contact with through social media and things. And I'm just a fan of having great conversation and exchanging ideas and point of views. And podcasting or having live discussions like this is a great format for me to spend, you know, an hour a day just having a cool conversation, hearing someone else's story. It motivates me and inspires me for a lot. So it keeps me going. You know, every time I'm done recording a podcast, I just want to go record another one. I'm like, all right, let's do another one. Let's do another one. It's a lot of work behind the scene, and I'm one of those people that I don't really ask help. I'll watch 3 hours of YouTube, how to figure out how to use this program I'm using, or I want to use Photoshop. I'll just download Photoshop and just start using it and figure it out. It's trial and error for most of the things I do in life, from running to wrestling to martial arts to podcasting to doing all this. So to have a venue after, you know, obviously I work full-time job. I have to, you know, bring money into the house. I have kids. I need, you know, all that. But at the end of the day, I enjoy doing these types of things, and having some sort of a continuation after my whole athletic career is done with is just something that I feel that keeps you motivated and inspired. So I can imagine it's the same way. You know, you were an athlete when you were young, you know, whether you inspired to be a pro or not, or whatever it is, now you're still in the same medium, just in a different way. And it's just, like I said earlier, it's every time I hear one of your matches on Wrestling Commentator, you could tell there's an excitement, there's a knowledge, this guy knows what he's talking about, and he seems to be enjoying himself. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's nothing that inspires me more or that captivates me more when I'm listening to something. You know, it's like you're watching something sometimes, or sports or whatever, something on TV, and the guy's super boring. Like he feel like he doesn't want to be there. And I hate it. You know, it's not fun. So props to the work you're putting in. I mean, how many different things you're doing now? Let's be honest. Like, how many different things you're still podcasting, right? You're still doing This Is Wrestling. That's the podcast, right?
Yep.
And
still doing This Is Wrestling.
That's with TSN.
Yep. That's with TSN 1200. We still put out weekly episodes. In fact, we just released an episode today as we're recording. So we've been continuing to release episodes since late 2019, December 2019. It's just been continuing to push through. Very rarely do we miss a week, and if we do miss a week, well, then we put out 2 that week. So we're just keeping up with everything, and it's been a lot of fun. Lee Versage is my co-host there on This Is Wrestling, and we both could get into some pretty heated discussions. Usually I'm a pretty chill, relaxed guy, but when it comes to professional wrestling and what's going on in the scene today, something about it just brings out, we're just both arguing with each other in a good way. It's a healthy debate.
Of course.
But it's a lot of fun, and Lee's great to work with, and we've just been able to coordinate this show, once a week, every week, and so I'm still doing the wrestling podcast. I recently started a football podcast because I figured I wasn't busy enough, and so I started a football podcast. It's way more casual. It's way more casual. I did at least one episode a week for every week of the season. And so
wow.
it's just a bunch of different guys that I'll bring on. It's like, usually it's myself and as you kind of mentioned through your journey, just like different people that you've met throughout your time. And so for me, it's been able to, talk with other different, whether it be broadcast professionals or even just, friends from, recently I talked with a guy that we were like the biggest, football nerds back in high school. And so we were able to talk again, and that was great. And so, kind of bringing that together. And so it's not weekly currently because really it's just, free agency right now in terms of the NFL and then getting ready for the upcoming NFL draft. But, we released an episode a week, every week throughout the season. And, I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, so I don't know if this is the point where you kick me off the podcast, but
and that's it. We're done.
That's it. Man. I figured as much. I knew that I revealed too much, but you got to hear the highs and the lows from me throughout that season, including the final play against the Niners with Zeke under center. But that's neither here nor there. I already said, spread my vitriol about that play on the podcast. So, but no, I still do podcasting. I do 2 podcasts now. It's just kind of been a joke with other friends. It's like, so when are you starting the 3rd podcast? When are you starting the hockey podcast? Or, I saw Slam Ball is back recently. Are you going to start a Slam Ball podcast? It's like, I wish I had more time in the day, let alone the week to get something going on another podcast. But I've just been doing the football podcast now just for like a year, and I just really wanted to start it because I love professional wrestling, and I've been like doing some form of professional wrestling audio for years. But I realized I hadn't really tried to dip my toes into other forms of content, whether it be sports or entertainment or TV or whatever. And so I was always a big football fan. Football was my first love growing up. I born and raised a Dallas Cowboys fan. I still remember when it was Quincy Carter at quarterback for the Cowboys. Wow. It was Julius Jones at running back, and Joey Galloway just had been traded from the Seahawks to the Cowboys, and so that was my introduction to the Cowboys when they were really bad. Some may argue they're still bad, but that's a different story. But nonetheless, I've just been decide, what, I've been a football fan for so long. Let's try this football podcast and see where we go with it. And it's been a lot of fun just talking with, people that I know. And we'll go long. Like sometimes we'll go, 2 hours, 3 hours sometimes. And sometimes not even just like, one time on an episode of the podcast, we went on a 10, 15-minute rant of how much we did not like Maroon 5. So that's just kind of how the podcast goes. So.
That's awesome, though. At the end of the day, if you're going to podcast, if you're going to speak in front of a microphone about a subject, a particular subject, it's got to be something you obviously love and you're passionate about. And if it's football, it's football. If it's wrestling, it's wrestling. It's for me, the concept I always had in mind is, I was introduced to podcasting through the means of let's say Joe Rogan and all these people that it wasn't really subject specific. It was just really having people on and having really cool conversations. And I kind of became a fan of that. And I'm like, you know what? I think I really would enjoy that, because there's nothing more that I enjoy than having a conversation. But with this new project that I'm, doing now with trying to launch this YouTube channel, it's also about my interests and how they vary sometimes, from, like I said, from pro wrestling to sports cards collecting, which I'm a huge, it's mostly baseball cards. I started back when I was a kid. Like everybody, I collected. I was a kid in the early 90s when it was the big boom of sports collecting. And, I started collecting cards for a few years back then. And I remember loving the opening, the collecting, just the thrill of opening a new pack every time. And then during the pandemic, it started getting hot again. I started seeing people talking about it, and how on social media they were doing these live breaks and this and that. And I was like, you know what? So I revisited it, and then I went to the store, I bought a hobby box, and then lo and behold, now it's been 2 years. I got about, I don't know, tens of thousands of cards in the back right here. It's just chasing. It's mostly only baseball. Baseball is the only sports that I could collect, but that's one of my interests, that people might not know about, so I'm kind of working maybe on having a show about either about hobbies or about sports card collecting. And like you said, it's like, it's something I have to be passionate about. And for me, the most part, it's sports related, being an athlete, but being from a young age, watching pro wrestling to baseball, to basketball, to football, it's just, and it's great. So I'm not surprised that you have a football podcast. Let me know, what's the name of the podcast?
It's called Gibby's Football Podcast. Very simple name. Gibby's Football Podcast is where it's at. Pretty lengthy episodes, and we just released an episode last week about free agency, and probably going to get another episode out about the later halves of the free agency period, whether Aaron Rodgers gets traded eventually to the Jets, and whatever happens with Lamar Jackson and that sort of deal, and any other last minute, because most of the big name free agents have signed already, but any other notable free agents that kind of popped on the radar, and so there's a big old 2.5 hour podcast in there just breaking down from every single team in the NFL, AFC, NFC.
Wow.
Go division by division, and we just break it down how we felt each team kind of helped in their case to try and win the division, and just an extensive breakdown. And I'll say I did wax poetic about the Cowboys offseason so far. I think they've been doing a good job so far, and so there's there's some really fun analysis in there. And then obviously if you wanted to go back and we have a Super Bowl recap, and there's a couple of college football episodes in there as well. Not week by week, more just like a check-in, just being all right, here's how the Heisman Trophy race is going, and here's some of the players to keep an eye on, and kind of a tease into a little bit into the future NFL draft coverage I want to do. It's Gibby's Football Podcast is the football podcast to listen to.
Well, I'll check it out for sure. College football is something that I've started paying attention to during these last couple of years. I don't know if it's a lot of the time I had with the pandemic and being sometimes stuck at home, but I started paying attention. I'll be honest, some of these games are pretty fucking exciting when I'm watching some college football. The fans are in it from the moment. It's like bang, bang, bang. And it's obviously I'm a huge NFL guy. I said Sundays for me, I'll sit on the couch, and I'll try to watch a few games, from the 1 o'clock games to the 4 o'clock games to the Sunday night football and the Monday night football. Yep. A lot of content. I don't watch when football season for me is over. It's like I don't really watch. Then in baseball, there's a split there. Then preseason starts, and when preseason baseball starts for me, I start paying attention. It's that's really the only sports I'll pay attention to. The prospects and the football and baseball are probably the two sports where I pay most attention. So that's why I kind of dip my toe in the college football, because I'm really interested of what the future of the sport is, especially in baseball. Baseball for me, and it's one of the reasons why I collect the cards, as well as I love collecting the minor league cards. They have these sets which are called Topps Pro Debut, which is only the minor leaguers. So you buy a box and you get 24 packs of 8 cards each, and you're going through the packs, and 90% of the guys you don't know, but once in a while you'll get like, oh, this is a really good prospect. This is a good prospect. They have a lot of autographs as well, so if you're lucky, like I've got some really nice cards where I'm like, holy shit, like one of one. It's the only one, you know. They have that now in sports cards collecting, which is really fun. But it also helps me follow the game, follow the prospect, do research on the guy. I kind of enjoy that kind of stuff, especially with baseball. Like I love paying attention to who's coming out of where, who's coming up, who's getting drafted, who's building their team right. It's the same thing in football, right? It's like you follow your own team, obviously, but if you have a podcast, you obviously know, you know in details. Like you want to know how certain teams are building, what's their strategy, what they're strong on, what they're weak on, and if they go, if they pay attention to that kind of stuff when they get into the draft, are they drafting to kind of correct those small mistakes, or are they, are they just trying to get protection for the quarterback, or are they trying to get weapons for the quarterback? Same thing for baseball. I think baseball is a bit different because I believe that a lot of the teams, they just based on raw talent. I think baseball is extremely, extremely hard to gauge someone that, that guy is going to be talented for 10, 15 years. Yeah. And football, sometimes you'll get these guys you could draft in the 6th round, and then you'll be like, this guy's got a 15-year NFL career, 7-time Pro Bowl, won one Super Bowl, and you're like, no one knew who this guy was coming out of college. Right. In baseball, it's a lot of these young kids are scouted from the time they're like 13, 14, 15 years old. A lot of these kids are drafted when they're still in high school. So I think there's a part of that business in baseball where there's so many different levels in the minor leagues, except for you think about football. Football, there's college. You go play football in college, you get drafted, and you're into the bigs. There's no minor leagues of football, Right. Baseball, you have A, you have AA, you have AAA, and then you there's different levels. You make your way up those levels, and then one day you're like, hey, you want to play in the show, and you get called up, and then it's make it or break it. I just love hearing those stories and enjoy watching and following these young guys play. I think that's what makes the sports fun. That's why I enjoy watching it as well. I'm sure it's a reason why you enjoy being in the business of sports broadcasting as well. You get to follow some of these players, like what you're doing right now with the hockey. I'm sure there's some of these players that might end up, doing something great with their career, and you're like, man, I used to call this guy his game when he was in the OHL. It's man, it's pretty cool. It's an awesome experience. I'm a big fan, so it's cool, man. I really man, it's really cool. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll keep going on your list of things you do. So from podcasting twice to sports commentating to pro wrestling commentating. You do journalism as well, right?
Yes. That is my full-time job. Yeah, I'm a reporter for now I'm a reporter for Quinty News, which is a combination of a radio station and an online publication here in the Quinty region. So it's funny. Just that's just my full-time role. It kind of changed, the last couple of years because last time I chatted with you, I was just a news anchor for CFRA in Ottawa, and and that was great. That was a lot of fun. The people I worked with there are fantastic. Still people there I talk with every day. It's just, a couple of years down, I felt it was kind of time to try something different. And it's funny because it was like, I didn't really want to be a TV journalist. I didn't want to be the guy that was like standing in front of the scene. It was like, here's what's going on behind me, blah, blah. But I still kind of want to report on stuff. And so this opportunity came up with Quinty News, where it's like I could do a combination of some online web stuff. So I've really been able to write more, which has been really fun, which I would not have expected. If you would have told high school me, I would have loved writing. I would have called you crazy. But I really enjoy like getting the story, made and kind of getting the facts and the details of something. And the benefit of it as well has been like I get to do some radio journalism. So it's like It's more like stuff like this when it comes to audio and just being able to create different, we call them voicers or wraparounds or whatever,
Yeah.
different reports essentially. And so that's been a lot of fun. I've been doing that the last couple of months, and so it's kind of narrowed down now where I've mainly been a City Hall reporter, so I'll head down to Trenton, Quinte West, and I'll cover City Hall there. I actually got a meeting tomorrow that I got to go to, so that'll be something. But I go there, I take notes and make sure everything's, I got everything in there, and then I come back over to the station and I read up my article and get my radio news reports set to go, and that's my day. And other aspects, like sometimes it'll be like you'll get called to an event, and so I'll go to an event and I'll talk with people there. And it's funny, the first day that I joined Quinte News, they're like, all right, so we need you to interview the mayor. I was like, what? First day? You want me to interview the mayor? I was like, all right, okay. And so I was like, I was
Baptism
nervous.
by fire. Look at
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Like,
Just
fuck.
throwing me right in there.
Hey, yeah, we want you. We need you. Your first gig is to interview the mayor of the city.
Yes. Yeah,
Ooh,
it's
that's
like
my first day. You know this, right? No.
Right.
We know. Yeah.
You
just
know,
go
but
ahead.
we have confidence in you. You could do it. It's like, okay, well, if I don't know if I share that same confidence, but all right, I'm glad somebody does. But no, it was fun. It was just like going there for an event and just talking with the mayor there and just kind of getting more details on it. And and so just kind of getting used to that. And it's a little bit of repetition. You just kind of continue to do these events. You kind of understand your writing style. And I'm a big proponent of quotes. I love getting like direct quotes. That way it really helps to build a story. And so that's just kind of been my deal the last couple of months. And obviously I still do some news anchoring stuff. I'll still be at the station. I'll, do some newscasts. And it's been a little bit different because, it's funny. We were talking about live versus pre-tape with wrestling commentary. When I was at CFRA, all of the newscasts there are live, if not 95% of them. And so now in Quinte News, specifically CJBQ, it's a lot of tape newscasts. And so that's been a little bit different for me. I did do some tape newscasts in my previous role at CFRA when I was, I would send out newscasts to different regions. So I would send out newscasts to Brockville and Kingston and Pembroke. So I was familiar with that, but having that be like, that's the thing you have to do, like as part of your job, it was a little bit of a change for me, but getting used to that and obviously incorporating the reporting and a lot more online web stuff. It's been good. I always enjoy a challenge and trying different things. And so far, it's been really quite a lot of fun just getting to talk with some of the different prominent figures in the city and across the Quinte region. And I've already been kind of thrown into you talk about thrown into a fire. Well, technically, I was kind of thrown into like a tornado aftermath because it was there was a tornado that went through the Tweed area a couple of months ago, and
wow.
there was a big city hall meeting, and so I had to head down to Tweed to cover that, and that was also like really big, and just getting to talk with the mayor of that area, and it's just like a big range of stuff. Like you'll go get sent to some charity event. And then another thing, it's like, oh, you have to go to City Hall so you can cover a budget meeting or whatever. So it's a great range of different things that you get to do.
That's awesome. I wasn't 100% sure of the type of news that you would, be doing, but I get the gist of it, so it's a lot of city news. Reminds me of, you watch Parks and Recs?
I haven't seen Parks and Recs forever, but yes, I love that show.
It's, I had never watched it until I'd say like during I think it was like a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. Wes Dawson, Dawson Graham. I call him Wes Dawson that by his wrestling name. He was like that was his favorite show. He used to tell me all the time, "Say you got to watch that show. It's fucking funny. I love that show." I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
It was on Netflix. One day I decided to start watching it. It's been 2 years now. I forget how long it's been since I started watching it. I think it's on my house every night. I've watched it. I've watched it probably 5 times now from first season to last season. It's just I just love that show. And it reminds me, there's a character in there. I forget her name, but that's basically what she does. She does the local news of everything from budget meetings to so it's pretty cool. Let me ask you this.
Sure.
Maybe I don't know if you're going to answer this because I have, obviously with social media nowadays and with the polarizing issues that we see on social media, on TV, from CNN to Fox to all this, all that, you know, a lot of people accusing the media of, you know, fabricating a lot of shit and bullshit.
Yeah.
You obviously work on a smaller scale, which is awesome as well. You seem to be more of a news so you tell the news. Do you also write opinion pieces as well, or it's just here's the facts, here's what happened? See, because I keep having these conversations, and this is one of the reasons why I can't watch or follow the mainstream media, because at the end of the day, they don't do news anymore. They give their opinions and then most of the time extremely biased opinions on whatever agenda they're pushing, right? And it's like, what happened to the days of someone showed up on TV and said, this is what happened here, these are the facts, and you make up your own mind of how you want to take this, right?
Yeah.
Any opinion on that kind of stuff? Does it bug you that it's extremely hard now to make out what is the truth and what is not the truth? You know, what's real and what's not real?
Yeah, it's certainly something I've been hearing quite a bit as a member of the media and obviously as a news guy. You hear it a lot. I could definitely say, you know, I think there's room for different sorts of, like, the opinion pieces, as you mentioned, and the news articles. I think as long as you're able to discern and say, hey, this is a news article, and this is all the information that's kind of being relayed from that article, then I think that's all right. You know, and if you relay, like, obviously you have different newspapers, they have their own, you know, columns, and there's an appeal to that too. People want to listen to this guy's opinions on current topics. You hear that on, like, talk shows all the time as well, in the case of radio stuff. So I always, like, I've never really been a news opinion guy. I've never really been somebody that's kind of delved too deep into that. I always get enjoyment on the news side of just being able to get facts about a situation. And trying to discern, like, what's kind of going on. And then it's funny you mentioned in terms of, like, you know, that's kind of my goal when I write these articles. I always want to make sure that, you know, I'm factually correct and I'm trying to relay the information as from a neutral standpoint. Obviously, I think you talk a lot about, you know, you go into the States and you talk about your Foxes and your CNNs or whatever. And it's very polarizing, and I think in their case, it's the race for a television rating, and so what's going to get a big TV rating? Well, if you got a guy saying this outlandish stuff, and you know, it's going to catch on, and that's just kind of the unfortunate nature of it. And you see now, like, you see just kind of where journalism is at in terms of, like, different jobs that are available. It's kind of shrinking right now, and how do you want to maintain it? And trust me, I've been in a situation. So I was in Ottawa when the whole stuff happened with the Freedom Convoy.
Yeah.
And so I know firsthand of people being upset at media members. I remember one time our parking lot got blocked off from people being allowed to leave. Because we were accused of being fake news and all that. And so I understand how, you know, it's tough for me to say because I'm not an opinion guy. I'm more just kind of, here's the facts of the situation. Here's the quotes that I got. Here's my way of trying to make it, you know, seem as neutral as possible. I think there are some times where it's like, you know, there's always the two sides of a story, right? But if the one side of the story is a known liar and bullshitter, like, what are you going to rely on more? The guy that's, you know, giving off the facts or whatever, you're going to take the bullshitter and try and put him on an equal playing field, right? So it's one of those deals where it's like, I think people think it's easy to kind of go in there. It's like, this is the real stuff, but you have to do your due diligence and you have to go in there. And I'm not saying this as somebody that's perfect at it either. News was never, like, I always enjoyed following it or whatever, but news was never really, like, my strength or my strongest point. It's more something that as I kind of learn from different, you know, journalists and news writers that I respect a lot in this industry and still talk with, and I've talked with people on both sides of the spectrum when it comes to, you know, political opinions. And so trying to be able to garner that and understand it and discern. I think it's just a combination of, I think it goes back to like a media literacy sort of standpoints, and our job as media members and journalists to make sure that we make it clear what's an opinion piece and what's an article piece, and so trying not to blur the lines too much and try and make it clear. So if it's an opinion piece, you could disagree with the guy, but you understand it's like he's not trying to state it as a fact. This is just what the guy is thinking of. So hopefully it's not too rambling on about the news stuff, but I get the question asked a lot in terms of just like, mainstream media and whatever, and it's like it's that's just kind of how I view things. As somebody that kind of comes from, technically I come from a mainstream media world, so I understand some of the inner workings and whatever, and I think there are definitely things that can be justified. I think there are certainly some criticisms that are justified, and others that, like, and maybe it's again just kind of coming through the inner workings of it, where I'm like, this, if you understand what's going through there, the work that's being put in, then you kind of come out with a different opinion. But all that to say, I think it's just kind of a couple of different things of like media literacy and trying to state what is an article, what's an opinion piece, and being understanding what's like reliable information to cite and what isn't reliable information to cite. It's a way more complicated answer than I think people want it. It's not as black and white as I think people want it to be. I think it's a little bit more gray. But it's just a bunch of different factors, just kind of going back to how news media is.
Honestly, it's one of the things I really wanted to ask you, because I knew you were in the business, and I appreciate your opinion. I knew at the end of the day, I know you're one of the good guys. You're in there. You're doing your. I've met you. I know you're not full of shit. And you're honest and you're sincere in everything you do. So. I'm pretty good judge of character, so it's like I would, I appreciate your comments and your point of view on it. And being a media member, it's extremely important, because I don't want it. I hate to see that kind of bullshit from the mainstream media bleed out into smaller news media like you and local media, where it's just like. There's a lot of people that only listen to people like you, and they don't listen to the mainstream media. So if it starts bleeding out, all that bullshit, and sponsors start telling you, hey, we have this agenda. Like, it's like, listen, it's like, you can't start having Pfizer starting to sponsor you in the local media and then start understand? Like, you'll watch an American show, and then every 2 minutes it's either insurance, commercial, or it's a medication commercial, and you're like, I have no idea what's going on over here. And then on CNN, they're like sponsored by Pfizer, and then you're just like, oh my God, like I don't understand it, But
it's a tough balance. It really is a tough balance in terms of like, because at the end of the day, with some of the journalism stuff, is like they have to find a way to get paid somehow, some way.
That's right.
But it's also, you have to try and make sure that you're not being influenced by like outside factors and sponsors, as you mentioned, and so it's that tough balancing act, because it's like, as mentioned before, you're seeing a lot of journalism jobs kind of go on the wayside, a lot of local stuff. I'm a big believer in the local media, and so just seeing some of that stuff kind of, it's tough to watch as a media member, but I always try and make sure that it's like, if there's any sort of like preconceived bias or whatever, I try and state it. Even on the wrestling show, like I had Riley on for a talk, but I also made it clear, it's like, hey, I've worked with Riley before. I've been on shows with him. I just want to make it clear to our audience that I'm not going to try and bullshit you or anything like that, but I worked with him before. This is, and we're both, we're friends outside of the wrestling business, and so I always try and do my due diligence on that, and,
of course,
and make sure that people are aware, because it's just a trust thing, as you mentioned at the end of the day.
I think transparency in any business and in the whole life. For me, transparency is something I've worked on these last few years, on being 100% transparent. I think transparency in the media, transparency in anything you do is extremely important, because the more transparent you are, the less surprises that the people should have, right? Like, I share a lot of my life on social media, and I've always tried to do my best to be as transparent as possible, meaning like I'll share the good times, but when there's bullshit going on in my head, I'll be extremely transparent about that too. And I'm transparent about the struggles that I go through, because I know at the end of the day, like I'm not saying I don't have millions of followers, but I do have some, and I do get comments, and I do get messages sent my way, and good and the bad, and I know people are watching and listening. So if I'm not being transparent and I'm constantly only showing the good stuff, and people can start believing, man, that guy's life is so good and that, but I go through the same struggle as anybody in life. You know, I struggle with mental health sometimes. I struggle with, you know, it's not always, you know, sunshine and rainbows. Life goes on. It's hard for everybody. We all go through our bullshit, and I think transparency is extremely important. And from someone like you, like I said, that I've known you for a few years, you know, and I know how sincere you are and how great of a guy you are. It's awesome to hear that as a media member, that your transparency comes through, and that you're extremely honest with how you conduct yourself. So I just want to say that. We'll end it on that. That's a good note to say. We've doing it for an hour right on the dot. Man, I can't tell you enough how I appreciate you accepting my invitation and spending the time. You know, I know you're a busy man, and an hour of your time is an hour of your time. So I appreciate you, man, and keep doing what you're doing, man. I'm proud of you, and let's do it, man. Keep pushing forward, and yeah, man. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank for having me on. It's really appreciate those comments. It's just it's a lot of fun just being able to talk with you and about just a whole bunch of different topics. And you know, it's been quite the ride the last couple of years when it comes to just the different roles and whatever. And so yeah, I really appreciate your time. And yeah, if people are listening to this, they want to listen to wrestling podcasts. This is wrestling. They could tune in on the TSN 1200 Ottawa podcast feed. That's where we release episodes now. Football podcast, Gibby's Football Podcast. You can search up my work if you're in the Quinte area or you're kind of interested in some of my write-ups. QuinteNews.com is where you can read some of my different write-ups of, you know, whether it be, you know, covering City Hall or covering, you know, different events. You could read me there. And also, I'll post up highlights. Your TV will put up highlights of different different games, and so I'll share clips of those as well, whether it be like big goal calls or whatever. And so, yeah, just keep tuned in on what I'm doing. You can follow me on Twitter. I got 2 Twitters. I made the mistake of having 2 Twitters.
Oh, no.
I know. It's a huge mistake. One's more of a personal one where it's, you know, I post up the Quinte News stuff and all my sports stuff. You can find me at Zach, ZACH _McGibbon, McGibbon. You can follow the wrestling Twitter at Gibby, and that's where I put out all my wrestling takes. And then you can follow This Is Wrestling as well at TIWTSN on all your favorite social media platforms, and same for Gibby's Football Podcast, all on your favorite social media platforms.
Savages, go give him a follow. I love it, man. Thanks again, man. And like I say to everybody, stay savage, my friend. All right, cheers.
Love it. Thank you so much, man.
All right, see you later.